My sister-in-law cried at my wedding, standing at the front of the church, flowers in her hand, tears running down her face while my husband said his vows. Everyone leaned over and whispered how sweet it was, how much she loved her brother. 3 years later, I found out why she was actually crying. And the reason did not just change my marriage, it ended hers. My name is Caroline Mercer. I am 34 years old, and this is my true story from Austin, Texas.
My husband, Ryan Mercer, has one sibling, his younger sister, Melissa, who is 31, blonde, and has the particular quality of someone who is always slightly more present than the situation requires. She was the first person Ryan introduced me to, 3 weeks after we started dating. Not his parents, not his college friends, Melissa. She came to brunch on a Sunday in March, ordered the same thing I ordered without noticing she had done it, laughed at everything Ryan said, and by the end of 2 hours had established herself as the emotional center of his life in a way I found warm and slightly suffocating in equal measure.
Ryan adored her. That was clear. He called her every other day. He asked her opinion on things, restaurants, car repairs, whether the new apartment had good light. She was his person, the way some siblings become the person you orient your entire internal compass around. I did not resent it. I understood it. I had a close relationship with my own brother in Knoxville. I knew what it meant to have a sibling who felt like home. What I did not know, what nobody told me, was the specific history that made Melissa's devotion to Ryan something more complicated than sisterly love. I learned that on a Tuesday afternoon in October, 3 years into our marriage, when I found a box in the back of our storage unit that Ryan had asked me never to open. He had not said it dramatically. He had said it the way you say, "Don't look in the hall closet before Christmas," casually, as if the contents were embarrassing rather than significant. "Old stuff," he said. "College things, just leave it." I had left it. For 3 years. Then I was looking for our tax documents, and the box was the only one I had not checked. And I opened it.
Here is what I want you to understand before I tell you what I found. I am not a suspicious person by nature. I am a pediatric speech therapist at a children's hospital in Austin. I spend my days helping kids find their voices, literally, the physical and neurological process of forming words that connect thought to sound. I am trained to notice what is not being said, as much as what is. Ryan and I had a good marriage. Not perfect, no marriage is, but honest and warm and built on the kind of daily choices that hold two people together when everything else is pulling them apart. He coached my nephew's baseball team. He drove 3 hours to help my mother move apartments after her knee surgery. He left coffee on the counter for me every morning, even on the days he left for work before 5. I was not looking for something wrong. I was looking for a folder labeled 2019 Federal. What I found instead was a shoebox with a rubber band around it. Inside the shoebox were photographs, printed photographs, the kind you develop at a drugstore, which told me they were old, at least 10 years. On the back of the first one, in handwriting I did not recognize, were the words Barton Springs Junior Year. The photograph was of Ryan. He was 21 or 22, laughing at the camera, sitting on a blanket by the water. His arm was around a girl. The girl was Melissa. I set the photo down.
I picked it up again. I looked at it the way you look at something you are hoping will rearrange itself into something different if you give it enough time. It did not rearrange. It was what it was. His arm around her shoulders, her head tilted toward his. Both of them squinting into the sun the way people squint when someone they trust is holding the camera. There were 11 more photographs. Same blanket, same afternoon, seen particular ease of two people who were completely comfortable being exactly where they were. I put the shoebox back. I found the tax folder. I drove home. I made dinner. I waited. After that afternoon, I did something I had never done before in my marriage. I started paying attention to the things I had trained myself not to notice. The way Melissa touched Ryan's arm when she was making a point. Not sisterly, not casual, but deliberate in the specific way of someone reminding another person of something wordless. The way she looked at me sometimes when she thought I was not watching. Not with hostility, with something more complex. The particular expression of someone who has accepted a loss, but has never fully made peace with it.
The way she had cried at our wedding, standing at the front of that church in her dusty rose bridesmaid dress, flowers in both hands, tears on her face, while Ryan said, "I do." Everyone had whispered how beautiful it was. His sister, so emotional, so happy for him. I had thought that too. For 3 years, I had thought that. Now I sat with a different understanding of what those tears had been.
I called my friend Dana, who had known Ryan in college and who I trusted with the specific things I could not say out loud to anyone else. I asked her, as casually as I could manage, whether she remembered Ryan dating anyone seriously before me. Dana was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Caroline, how much do you actually know about his junior year?" I gripped the phone. "Tell me," I said. Dana told me.
Ryan and Melissa had not grown up together. This was the piece I had never been given, the structural fact that recontextualized everything else. Their parents had divorced when Ryan was 9 and Melissa was 6. Ryan had gone to live with their father in Dallas. Melissa had stayed with their mother in San Antonio. They had seen each other on holidays, summer weeks, the occasional long weekend. They had grown up as close as two people can be while living entirely separate lives. When Ryan started at UT Austin at 18, Melissa transferred in as a sophomore 2 years later. They lived in the same city for the first time since childhood. They reconnected the way people reconnect when absence has kept them from becoming ordinary to each other. Intensely, with the particular electricity of people who feel familiar and new at the same time.
Dana said she had always thought it was unusual. The closeness, the way they were together at parties, the way Ryan talked about her. She said she did not know the full extent of it. She said she had always assumed it was just... She paused. Just one of those complicated family situations that nobody quite addresses directly. I asked her one question. Did anyone know?
Dana said she thought their mother might have suspected. She said she thought that might be why their mother had always been slightly cool toward Ryan, slightly watchful, in a way that had never quite made sense given how close he and Melissa seemed to be. I thanked Dana. I hung up. I sat in my car in the hospital parking lot for 20 minutes after my shift ended, watching other people walk to their cars and drive away toward their evenings. Then I drove home and started making a different kind of plan.
Here is what I want to tell you, because this is the part that matters most, and the part most people get wrong. I did not spiral. I did not confront Ryan that night over dinner while my hands were shaking. I did not call Melissa screaming. I did not post anything, tell my mother, or do any of the things that would have handed the situation to someone else and made me a character in my own story instead of the author of it. I went to one therapy session with a counselor named Dr. Angela Reeves, who had an office on South Congress and a reputation for being honest in the specific way that costs you money but saves you years. I told her everything in 50 minutes. She listened. Then she said 2 things. First, what you are feeling is not jealousy. It is the specific grief of realizing the map you have been using to navigate your marriage was missing a road. Second, before you decide anything, you need to know whether Ryan understands what that history was. Because there is a difference between a man who is hiding something and a man who has spent 15 years convincing himself that what happened was something other than what it was. I sat with that for 3 weeks. I watched Ryan. I watched Melissa at Sunday dinner, at his birthday, at the casual Tuesday evening she dropped by because she was in the neighborhood. I watched the two of them together with the specific attention of someone who is no longer filling in the gaps with the most generous explanation.
And what I saw was this. Ryan did not carry it as a secret. He carried it as something he had filed away in a box in a storage unit and labeled old stuff and genuinely believed no longer existed. Melissa carried it every single day. If this story is sitting somewhere in your chest right now, if you have ever known something you were not supposed to know and had to decide what to do with it, stay with me. Hit subscribe before the next chapter because what happens at Thanksgiving is the part I still think about every year. Ryan's family Thanksgiving was at their mother Diane's house in San Marcos, 45 minutes south of Austin. Diane was 62, recently retired from 28 years of teaching high school biology, with the particular observational quality of a woman who had spent 3 decades watching teenagers lie to her face and had gotten very good at knowing when someone was not telling her the whole truth. I had always liked Diane. She was direct without being unkind. She asked about my work with genuine interest. She remembered the names of my patients. Not specifically, but the general shapes of them. How is the little boy with the apraxia coming along? Things like that. What I understood now, that I had not understood before Dana's phone call, was why Diane had always watched Melissa at family gatherings with that particular careful attention. Not the attention of a mother who was proud. The attention of a mother who was waiting for something she hoped would never come. We arrived at noon. Ryan's Uncle Greg and his wife Pamela were already there. Melissa arrived 20 minutes later with her husband of 2 years, Brandon, who sold commercial real estate and was the kind of tall, agreeable, slightly generic man who fills a room without particularly inhabiting it. He brought a pecan pie from a bakery in Austin and shook everyone's hand and settled immediately into a football conversation with Greg. Melissa hugged Ryan first. She always hugged Ryan first. Then me. Brief, efficient, the hug of someone going through emotion. Dinner was good. Diane's turkey was always good. The table was full and loud in the warm way of families that have learned to keep conversation in the shallow end, where it is safe and nobody drowns. I sat across from Melissa. I watched her. She was performing normalcy the way I had learned to recognize performance. The slightly elevated effort, the laugh that came a half second after everyone else's, the eyes that moved to Ryan and then away, to Ryan and then away, with the regularity of something she could not fully control. Brandon refilled her wine twice. She finished both glasses faster than the meal required. After dessert, Diane asked everyone to help clear the table. The kitchen became the kind of organized chaos that Thanksgiving kitchens always become. Too many people, too many dishes, too many half-conversations over running water. I was drying a serving dish when Melissa came to stand beside me at the counter. She picked up a dish towel. We worked in silence for a moment. Then she said, quietly enough that only I could hear, "You found the box, didn't you?" It was not a question. I set the serving dish down. I turned to look at her. Melissa was staring at the window above the sink. Her profile was composed in the way of someone who has been preparing for a specific conversation for a long time and has finally stopped dreading it. "How long have you known?" she asked.
3 weeks, I said. She nodded. She folded her dish towel with the careful precision of someone who needs something to do with their hands. Are you going to tell him you know? I am going to tell everyone, I said. Melissa turned to look at me. For the first time in 3 years of dinners and holidays and Sunday afternoons, she looked at me without the careful management of her expression. She looked at me the way a person looks when they have run out of maintenance energy, and all that is left is the truth underneath. Caroline.
You cried at my wedding, I said. My voice was quiet, level. The same voice I use when I tell a parent that their child's progress is going to take longer than they hoped, and they need to hear it clearly. You stood at the front of the church with flowers in your hand, and you cried. And for 3 years, I thought it was because you were happy for your brother. And I told people that. I told my mother that. I said his sister loves him so much. Melissa's jaw tightened. It was not your marriage that bothered me, she said. I had let it go. I had moved on. I married Brandon. I built a life. She stopped. Seeing him say those words to you, it was harder than I expected. Does Brandon know? I asked. The silence that followed told me everything.
Melissa? Diane's voice from the kitchen doorway. She was standing very still, holding a casserole dish, looking at her daughter with the expression of a woman who had been waiting 15 years for this exact moment and had not decided yet whether she was relieved or devastated that it had finally arrived. Brandon appeared in the doorway behind her. He looked at Melissa. He looked at me. He looked at his wife's face, which was doing something faces do when a person realizes the private architecture of their life has just become visible to everyone in the room. What is going on? He said. Ryan came in from the living room 30 seconds later, drawn by the particular quality of silence that pulls people toward it even when they do not know why. He saw Melissa first, then Diane, then me. He looked at me the way he looked at me when he knew something was wrong and was trying to calculate how wrong before he responded. It was one of the things I had always loved about him. He did not panic, he assessed. But I had also learned, in 3 weeks of watching him, that assessment sometimes served as a substitute for acknowledgement. Not today. Ryan, I said, I found the shoebox. The color left his face. Not the theatrical draining of someone performing shock, the specific pallor of a person for whom a locked room has just been opened in front of everyone they love. Caroline. I am not angry, I said, and I meant it. I had spent 3 weeks with Angela Reeves arriving at the specific shape of what I actually felt, which was not rage and was not devastation. It was the cleaner, colder feeling of a woman who needed the truth laid flat on the table, where everyone could see it, and stop working so hard to pretend it was not in the room. I am not here to blow up your family. I am here because I deserve to exist in this marriage without a history that everyone knows about except me. Ryan looked at his sister. Something passed between them. Not the warm current of siblings who share a language, but the specific communication of 2 people who have been maintaining a shared silence and are watching it end simultaneously. When did it stop? I asked him. Not accusatory, clinical. The speech therapist asking for the timeline. Ryan sat down at the kitchen table. He put his hands flat on the surface. Before I moved back to Austin, after graduation. Before I ever met you. We were both... He stopped. He looked at the table. We were both confused about what it was. We talked about it. We decided that it couldn't be anything. That it wasn't anything. We never discussed it again. You put it in a box, I said. Yes. And she, I said, nodding toward Melissa, did not. Diane set the casserole dish down on the counter. She looked at her daughter. Melissa, does Brandon know? Brandon was standing in the doorway with his hands in his pockets, looking at his wife with the expression of a man who has just understood that the life he thought he was living has a room in it he was never shown.
No, Melissa said. One word. Small and final. Brandon nodded once, slowly. He took his keys from his pocket. He picked up his jacket from the chair by the door. I am going to drive for a while, he said. He looked at no one specifically when he said it. He walked through the kitchen without stopping and out the front door. Through the window above the sink, we heard his car start and back out of the driveway. Melissa sat down at the kitchen table. She put her face in her hands.
The guests left by 8. Greg and Pamela said their goodbyes with the tactful speed of people who understood they had been present for something that needed privacy to finish. Ryan and I drove home in silence. Not the silence of two people who have nothing to say, the silence of two people who have so much to say that none of it can fit into a 45-minute drive down a dark highway. He reached for my hand at the first stoplight. I let him hold it. At home, we sat at the kitchen table with decaf coffee and talked until 1 a.m. Not fighting, talking. The specific, necessary conversation that marriages sometimes require. The one where you stop protecting each other from the complicated parts and decide whether you are strong enough to hold them together instead. Ryan had spent 15 years filing something away that he had never fully examined. He was not a dishonest man. He was a man who had learned early that the most efficient way to survive something confusing and shameful was to place it in a box and label it old stuff and never open it again. I told him that strategy had a cost, that the cost had been paid for 3 years by me, by a woman who had walked into a marriage carrying a map with a missing road, who had sensed the absence without being able to name it, who had spent 3 years wondering why a specific room in her own life felt slightly wrong and never being able to find the door. He cried. The real kind. The kind that comes from a place most people spend their lives keeping locked. I am sorry, he said. I did not understand how much I owed you that information. I told myself it was over, and that made it irrelevant. I was wrong. I looked at my husband across the kitchen table, the man who left coffee for me every morning, who drove 3 hours for my mother's knee, who coached my nephew's baseball team with the particular patience of someone who genuinely believes children deserve to be taught well. I know, I said. I am not leaving. But this has to be the last box. He nodded. It is the last box. We went to couples therapy for 4 months. Dr. Angela Reeves, same office on South Congress. Ryan called it the most uncomfortable and most necessary thing he had ever done. By the 3rd session, he stopped calling it uncomfortable. Melissa and Brandon separated in January. She called me in February. Not to apologize exactly, but to say something that landed more honestly than a formal apology would have. You did not deserve to be the last person in the room to know, she said. That was not fair to you. It was never fair to you. No, I said. It was not. We are not close. We are not enemies. We are 2 women who exist in the same family and have learned to be honest about what that means and what it does not. Eleanor, Ryan's niece, Melissa's daughter from a later relationship, calls me Aunt Caroline and brings me drawings from school. I keep them on my office door at the hospital, next to the drawings my patients make. Small voices finding their way out. That is what I do. that is what I have always done. I am 34 years old. I live in Austin, Texas. I have a good marriage. Not perfect. Not the one I thought I had, but the real one. The examined one. The one where the boxes have been opened and the contents have been named, and neither of us is pretending anymore.
That marriage is worth more to me than the easier one was. Here is what I know now, and what I want you to take from this story. The thing you are sensing but cannot name, trust it. Write it down. Date it. The pattern your instincts are tracking before your heart is ready to admit it is real, respect it. It is not paranoia. It is intelligence that arrived before the evidence did. And the truth, when it finally comes out, does not always feel like winning. Sometimes it feels like standing in a kitchen in San Marcos holding a dish towel while the architecture of 3 years quietly rearranges itself around you. But it is still better than the box. It is always better than the box. This is my true story from Austin, Texas. Drop your city in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. And if this story reminded you to trust your own eyes, you already know what to do.